So, who's got questions? We covered quite a lot of stuff there.
They are all in the Notion page. Nicola is just bossed getting these questions down. Like I lost it at the first question. I couldn't keep up.
I'm going to be really honest. You might have answered them, but I was watching the chat, not listening.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so Esther asked what's my current gear. Basically, I've got a link that you can follow that shows you my current gear with affiliate links. If you want to help me out, that would be most welcome. I got the Sony a7 III. Now, this is a question that Charles brought up in a tweet this morning. There was a thread going on about whether to jump into the Sony a7C or to go with one of the crop sensors, which would be the a6400, the a6600. When I went shopping for my camera in May 2018, the a7 III had just been announced, and that's not what I was going to buy. In fact, they were impossible to find when they were announced. I was going to look at the Panasonic GH5, which is a micro four thirds sensor, or the Sony a6500, because that was the only crop sensor Sony that was around at the time. And I went into the store in Glasgow, and the reason I wanted the Panasonic was because it was the only one that doesn't cut out after 30 minutes recording time, or so I thought. When I spoke to them in the shop, they said in the USA that is the case, but in Europe they still cut out at 30 minutes. And I record long form interview content. 30 minutes wasn't going to work for me. What was I going to do? So he said, well, the Sony rep's here today. Would you like to have a chat? I said, sure. So he came through and he said, the a7 III's just come out. I said, I know, and it's $2,000. I'm not buying it. He said, well, we had a customer order one, and he's found one somewhere else, so we have one for sale. And I was like, oh, don't tell me that. So bear in mind that the a7 III also cuts out at 30 minutes recording time. There was no way around that. I was just going to have to get a camera that had that limitation. But that meant the choice between a full frame camera or a crop sensor. And I'd already done quite a lot of research. I knew the differences. One of the benefits of full frame is that at the same aperture number and the same focal length, you'll get a better blurred background. So that's one of the differences that you get between full frame and crop sensor. And so I went next door into Costa, had a cup of coffee, phoned my wife in a panic and said, are you going to give me permission to do this? And she said, do what you want, that's what you always do anyway. And so I went back in and put my money down on the a7 III, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So I don't claim to know all the differences and the ins and the outs, but I have been following quite a few content creators ever since then, keeping up to date with all the Sony gear in particular, but you know, the Fujis and the Canons and all of that. And I just love camera gear. And I think it really helped me to give me the best image that I could afford. In fact, it was probably a bit more than I could afford, but we managed it. And since then, I have actually bought the a6400. So I now do have a crop sensor camera. And the reason I bought that was as a B cam, because I do 2 camera shoots for interviews. And the Sony a6400 was the first of the Sony line not to have the 30-minute recording limit. So it solved a big problem for me. And I got around it with a7 III by, let me switch cameras and show you this here. This is an external recorder which takes an HDMI signal out of my a7 III straight into the device. The device itself takes an SSD, and I can use this as the recorder instead of the camera, or I can actually use both at the same time. But this allows me to monitor myself, because for those of you with a7 III, you'll know that it doesn't have a flip out screen. What were they thinking? So now I can monitor myself and I can record for longer than 30 minutes, and I've got 2 cameras that let me do that. So I think I'm good. I don't think I need to be buying any more camera gear for a while. But if you're in the market, as I know some of you are, and you're choosing between one of the crop sensor bodies or the new A7C, I would urge you once again to go and check out Gerald Undun's channel, because he's done a fantastic video on why he thinks that you should buy the Sony A7C, and he puts it together much better than I ever could. If I was in the market now, I would be looking at the A7C before I looked at the A7S3, because the A7S3 is like the all singing, all dancing Ali Abdaal camera. The A7C does pretty much everything that I would need, and so I think that's where I'd be putting my money.